Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations.
Hey everyone, welcome to an incredibly special episode of Kev Talks. You can see that I am missing my partner, Kevin Parkerson, and he'll explain why, I'm sure, in the notes for this podcast. But he has I can't remember the name of it, but he has a phobia of the number 13, and so this is our 13th episode. And Kevin had an incredible idea to have a special guest with just me on this episode, and I am so honored to have this guest. Her name is Kathy Mosley. She happens to be my mother, and we're going to have a conversation around the deep history of transportation and logistics in my family. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed sitting down, talking about it with my mom. And of course, after we leave, I think of, 100 things that we could have said, but I am just so grateful that my mom, took time out of her evening to sit down and have a chat with me. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And so I want to introduce you to my mom, and we're going to get right to it. Here we go. All right, Mom, here we are. Kevin Parkerson doesn't like the number 13, so he's not going to be on. He's told me he's not even going to do anything for it. So he's a little afraid of the number 13, and I don't even remember what they call it, but there is a true phobia around the number 13. And this is episode 13 of our podcast, Kev Talks podcast. And so for everybody that doesn't know you, besides, my mom, tell them who you are, and then we'll get into having a conversation.
Okay. I'm Kathy Mosley, Kevin's mother. He's my firstborn. Very proud of him.
Thank you very much. And so we've lived in Northwest Arkansas most of our lives. Short stint in Fort Worth, Texas, brief period of time, but for the most part, born and raised here in Northwest Arkansas.
Right. I was born in a little town east of here, Clifty. Lived there all of my life until I married your dad. We moved to Springdale, and we mainly stayed in Springdale until, you were fifth grade. Maybe we moved to Lowell.
Yeah, fifth grade. Yeah. Right around spring break in March of fifth grade.
Right. So yes, we've been here.
Yeah, Northwest Arkansas. That's what I tell everybody. Born and raised. But so you've watched every episode of Kev Talks, most every episode. Yeah. Giving us some good feedback. We actually talked about it on one that we recorded last week.
No, I didn't get to see that one.
Yeah. So, it hasn't published yet, but we were actually talking about some of the feedback that we've gotten, and Kevin Parkerson was like, Kevin's mom is the one who's giving us feedback. So, hopefully it's making us better, but, Kevin Parkerson's idea to do this, besides the fact that he does not like the number 13, he thought it would be a good opportunity for us just to kind of talk about our history, my history, our family's history in transportation and logistics. And before we start kind of going down that road, my question to you was, did you ever think that I would be in transportation and logistics? And it's okay. Like if you tell stories about me as a kid or whatever, that's fine. I'll edit out the bad stuff and make the good stuff look even better. But Did you ever think that this would be a path that I was going to take?
No, I really didn't until you got into it. But I wasn't really sure what you might do. You had so many ideas. You loved to ski. For a while, you were going to be a professional water skier, and I'm just
fleeting moment.
Yeah. And then I guess your junior or senior year of high school, you went to work for a dental lab.
Mm-hmm.
And when you started to college, your aspiration was to be a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
And after the first semester, you came home and you told me, I've sat down and I put all the numbers to this. And if I continue down this road, I will be so far in debt before I can ever see a penny.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think this is what I want.
Yeah.
And
plus the fact that I didn't get home in time to get the mail, my academic probation mail.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That had something to do with it. Yeah.
Something to do with it. But, I always knew as a small child, you were very determined in whatever you did. And so I always felt good about any decision that you made.
Yeah.
And so, I just said, well, what are your plans now? And you said, well, I'm just going to go back and work at the dental lab for a while. And I think maybe sometime during that, you met Richard James.
Yeah. Well, there was the Navy recruiter.
Oh,
before
yes,
that,
the
so
Navy recruiter, and I did not like that at all.
Yeah.
No, I was not happy about that. Yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah.
I think I wasn't very nice to him when he came to visit.
It wasn't a pleasant visit, but we did go down that road for a hot minute to to look at the opportunity to go into the Navy. And then I met Richard because of Debbie and started going down that path. But being I love the time, and maybe it's ironic, it isn't the right word, but J.R. Clausing, who owned the dental lab that I went to work for, who was so good to me and taught me so much about business in general and kind of piqued my interest in business. So today, it's been 4 years since he passed away. So I just saw on Instagram. And so I stay in touch with Gloria and two of his daughters, and they contact me. They love to hear stories about their dad. And so, JR was good to me as far as, a job in high school and a job out of high school.
Right. He was. I never met him.
Yeah.
But I knew, he was teaching you.
Yeah.
And I knew that you were eager to learn. And so, like I said, as a small boy, you were determined and you had the mindset that nothing was going to get you down and that you would end up where you needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something that you guys always instilled in, in me and us as young boys, was that hard work, that work ethic. And, we grew up with what we needed and we worked for what we wanted,
right. Right.
And I have always said, I always appreciate that,
Well, as I was growing up, my family was very poor, and my mother and dad came through the Depression. And so they taught us the values of things. We may have not appreciated it then, but we knew, that we had to work to get what we wanted.
Yeah.
And I think it made us better people. And so with that, I knew that's the way I wanted to raise you and your brother.
Yeah.
The same thing. I couldn't afford to give you everything that you wanted. And so if you wanted it, you had to work for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely. And I have no I appreciate that a ton. I, tell the story. People like, how long have you been working? I said, well, 11. And they're like, why 11? And I said, well, I remember coming home and telling my parents that I found this bike at Walmart that I wanted, and it was $55. And I had to work for it. I had to earn it.
Yep.
And I remember you toting our green Lawn Boy lawnmower around and mowing Danny Purrier's yard and, other yards so that I could earn, $5 at a time, earn enough money to go down to Walmart. And I remember you driving me down there, and we loaded that box up in the trunk of probably the Thunderbird, and drove it back to Lowell. And I remember putting it together, by myself, taking out all the parts and putting it together, because I was surprised it didn't come put together. But so, before we keep going down the road of, me getting into transportation, which was in 1987, let's back up and talk about our history in transportation, because it really is. When I'd never thought too much about it. I just thought about, being a young teenager and, young kid, and, Farrell driving a truck, and, Don Phillips and Danny Purrier and, Go Park, just all the what I would refer to as the crew, right? And Robert Reddish and everybody, kind of our clan of people. It really goes back further than that.
It goes back further than that. Your grandpa Higgins drove a dump truck for a gravel company in Fayetteville. Your uncles on your grandmother's side, or on your grandmother's side, several of them drove over the road, and it goes back a long time. And then, like you said, Farrell, he drove for a while over the road, but then he had a dump truck for several years. And so, you grew up around trucks.
Yeah. Well, Dad, for those, for those people that don't know, for the listeners, I'll refer to Dad kind of two ways. So, my biological father was, he was tragically killed in an accident when I was 5 years old, but he drove a truck for a hot minute. He drove for Willishaw, right?
For quite a while. For several years, 2 or 3 years. And then at the end, he was in construction. But,
But Uncle Albert,
and they made many, many trips to California.
Yeah. Well, they told stories about Dad and Uncle Albert at Uncle Albert's funeral last year, with George being in a truck stop and George Jones singing in the truck stop, and George Jones trying to get Uncle Albert to come, drive the bus for him.
Right.
And, I think him and Dad were singing, they sang on stage with him. That's the story that Uncle Albert tells me, or did tell me. But, so from a very young age, Grandpa Higgins, Dad, and then Farrell, all the Uncle Albert and Uncle Bob was, he was with McClinton Brothers, and, he went on to have his own trucking company and gravel company, and then Dad, and just all the, Don Phillips. I was going through hats last night, and I was trying to get a better storage system for all the hats that I have, and because I have hats from the 70s and 80s that I've kept for some crazy reason. And I found a Don Phillips Trucking Company hat.
Really?
Yeah. It's cool. So I was pretty excited to see that. But so we just, as a family, that was our life for a while. And then, Dad drove for Tyson, right? He drove over the road for Tyson. And we had some, friends at the time, George and Kay Smith. George was with Tyson for a while, right?
Yes, he was. I don't think he drove. He was the manager, that allocated their loads and that kind of stuff. But they were really good friends of ours. And
George went on to be like chief operating officer at JB Hunt.
I think so. Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
I knew they moved away for a while.
Yeah, so I think he went. I'd asked Dad one time, because he told me, I said, "You have any regrets, in life professionally?" And he told me, he said, "Yeah, telling George Smith that I wouldn't come to work for him at JB Hunt because He's like, yeah, that was a regret. But,
Right.
so we, George and Kay and then Don and Danny, they all had their own trucks and drove over the road.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then you've had a little experience in trucking yourself, right?
Oh, yes. For about 2 or 3 years, I drove a gravel truck for a company called C&E, Dirt and Gravel. It was Carolyn and Earl Kepler. Yeah. And in fact, Carolyn taught me how to drive. Farrell tried to teach me, and it just didn't work out at all. But Carolyn put me on the truck. She rode with me. She told me everything to do. And then one day they just turned me loose. And so, yeah.
No experience whatsoever.
No experience whatsoever. But worked for, really good crew that they hired out to. And, they watched over Carolyn and I both.
Yeah.
But me particularly, because I was a newbie, and watched me backing up and telling me when to dump the load.
Yeah.
And that the dump thing was empty, and
right.
I could put it back down and stuff like that for a while.
Now, is there, I have memory of you kind of getting in a hairy situation with a dump truck one time. Is that right? Or did I make that story up in my mind?
No, that's true. In Springdale, there was this, it's still there, but it was a very small park. And it had a very small pond. It was just called the Duck Pond. And so the city of Springdale decided that they wanted it cleaned out and dug a little bit deeper and made it a little bit bigger. And so Earl Kepler had his bulldozer and his backhoe and everything down in this pond. And Carolyn and I were hauling the sludge and stuff out. Well, I got the dump truck stuck big time. Had to get pulled out. So after that, I was a little bit leery of backing down in there, but it all worked out fine. But no, that was an experience. And then when Earl told me that I had to learn how to run the backhoe so I could load my own truck, he let me load it one time and said, no, he said, I'll be here to load it for you. So I guess I wasn't as good as I should have been.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to do everything, right?
No.
You can't be all things to all people.
Because you have to get, in any kind of truck, you have to get your load even.
Yeah.
Or you're going to run into problems.
Yeah. You don't want it to be heavy on the left side or the right side.
Right.
Yeah. That wouldn't be a good thing. But you did that about the same time that Farrell got his dump truck, right? Or
he had his truck before I went to work for them. But didn't have any intentions of going to do that.
Yeah.
But they needed a driver, and I think Farrell said, "Oh, Kathy can do it." So there I went.
That sounds about right. Yeah. How long did he have his dump truck? Do you remember? Seemed like it wasn't. It
was probably about 5 years.
Was it?
Yeah. And then he started having some medical problems. It was before we moved to Lowell, and that was one of the reasons we moved, was because we were living in Springdale and parking it in the driveway, and the neighbors complained, which I understand now.
Right.
About
because he left early in the morning.
Early in the morning.
Yeah, had to start it up and let it run.
So we moved out in the country.
Yeah.
But, so.
Well, that reminds me. Who lived across the street from us when Dad had his dump truck on Overo Circle? Do you remember that? Caddy corner was Mr. and Mrs. Hunt.
Was it?
Yeah, because
That's
I
right.
remember. I remember
when they sold to. They built another house or something. Yes.
Yeah,
that is right.
Because when we were finishing the house and moving in, I remember Mr. and Mrs. Hunt coming over and introducing themselves.
Right.
And Brian was their son was fairly young at the time, and I think he had a gold Trans Am. And I just remember being, 10 or 11 years old and seeing this gold Trans Am and thinking,
I knew you would remember something like that.
Yeah. This cat's cool. He's got a gold Trans Am. Yeah, I had a big wheel and he had a gold Trans Am.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I remember moving to Lowell because of the dump truck. And I think he went to work for the ice company. I went to work for the ice company when I was 14. So that would have been about 3 years after we moved. 3 years after we moved to Lowell.
So maybe 3.5 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Because I think I think it took him about 6 months or so to turn it, and it wasn't a dump truck when he bought it.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Went to Tulsa and got it, the truck and the frame and whatever.
Yeah.
So it took a while to build it.
Yeah. And he just wanted to get off of the road because I remember he was gone, a ton,
and he knew some people that were they didn't own trucks, but they drove the McClinton Anchor trucks.
Yeah.
Mitchell Hadley was
one. Oh yeah, I remember that name.
Yeah, and I can't remember some of the others. That's been many, many years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time. But I think Robert Reddish got his truck about the same time too, or was it after?
Yeah, just a little bit after.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I remember they, they were both leased out or were hauling loads for McClinton Brothers.
They were contracted to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember riding in the truck with him quite a bit, during the summer, just be exhausted at the end of the day doing nothing, riding in the truck. And I didn't know how he did it. This is a lot of, lot of work.
And there again, do you remember taking trips with Don Phillips?
Oh yeah. Long
haul.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know where all you are.
It seems to me
forever,
like my recollection is Jeff and I both did it one summer, and it seems like we were both gone like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think
at
so
a time.
Too. And it was way back before cell phones.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So I didn't have any way of knowing where y'all were or how you were making it, if you were all right. But yeah.
Yeah,
I remember when you got home, we were out in the backyard and we were having watermelon, and you were upset because watermelon was your thing.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that, and I remember like when Jeff went. I remember him coming home because Jeff was a tiny truck driver at that time. He's 8 years old and he had his Peterbilt hat on. And I remember Don pulling up, and he had a conventional Kenworth at the time. Right. It was blue. And I remember Jeff he had his arm hanging out the window and his little trucker hat on, and he was just happy as a lark. Yeah. But probably didn't want to come home.
He probably didn't. He would have stayed gone.
Yeah. He loved the truck. And I've got, I've got pictures of Jeff with Don's, that white and red Peterbilt. Yeah. Back there behind Harps was George's, I guess.
There was some kind of truck shop back there, I think.
Oh, was there? I always wondered why we went back there.
There was some kind of truck shop that Don used for repairs and stuff like that back there. Because I remember going back there and taking some pictures of him and Jeff. Yeah. Standing by that truck.
Yeah. I'm going to try to post one of those pictures when we do this, because it's one of the greatest pictures to see Jeff. There's a couple of pictures. There's one with Don by himself, and then there's one with Jeff hanging out the driver's side window of that Peterbilt. And then there's one with Jeff standing next to the Peterbilt on the ground. So
it's kind of surprising that he didn't go into it.
Yeah. But. Yeah. I mean, he was just a tiny, when he was a kid, he was just a tiny truck driver. But, talking about, so the dump truck to the ice company, and I never really considered this, going into the ice company was one of the greatest jobs for me because we worked. I mean, I don't think I saw you for 3 summers, honestly, because we left the house about 6. The lights would come on at 5:30. We'd leave the house at 6. We'd have to have the trucks loaded by 7, and we'd probably go to Burger King and have, cinnamon toast sticks or something. And then we'd hit the road, and we might get home, 7, 8, something like that. But like during the 4th of July, we would never get home.
No, you were gone like 3 days at a time.
Yeah.
you didn't come home. You would come back to the ice company to reload and stuff. And
Yeah.
I would try to be there with food or whatever you needed. But
yeah. But I never really considered until, like I said, just a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about this, and that job in itself, even though it was, I carried ice into a store and, threw it out of the back of a truck, it was really logistics, because every morning we had these little blue 3-ring binder books that had our route on them.
right.
And my job sitting over there was to tell, whoever was driving, and it was generally, they paired me up with Gary Walden.
Right.
What's the next stop? Where are we going? How we doing this? And we got it. We planned those days, and it was all manual. We didn't have anybody telling us how to do it, so we had to plan our day.
And to do it the shortest and quickest way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was logistics.
Yeah, and get back so you can get another load. Mm-hmm. And there was no like, oh, your route's done, go home. Yeah. It was like, oh, you ran out of ice. Mm-hmm. You still have your route left to go.
So you go back and get more.
You go back and get more. Yeah. And if you're running a Eureka Springs, Bearville, Green Forest route, you run out in Eureka Springs, it's a long day.
It is.
Yeah, it's a long day. But, great. For me, that was the greatest summer job I could have ever had.
Well, it was a hard job, but it was a good job for you as a teenager.
Yeah.
Because they paid good, I guess. Back then.
Yeah.
It seemed like, you got paid good.
I think it was $88 a week and a penny a bag. Mm-hmm. And I paid cash for the first 2 cars I had. Right. Working the summer job.
Right.
So to me, it paid pretty good. Of course, $1,500 for this car and $2,000 for that car. It's not a lot back then, but
no.
It was a great job, but still just another venture into logistics. And I did that until I couldn't do it anymore and had to get the job. I didn't have to get the job, but part of the school program was, get a job during the year.
During the year.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Well, I think he might have sold the company.
He sold, I think it changed like a year or two afterwards. Yeah, it was a different, I missed doing it the last year because after I graduated high school, I remember Dad asking me, he's like, you going to come down and run around? And I'm like, no, I got a full-time job. Mm-hmm. And, I can't do it. I probably would have made more money doing that than I did working at the dental lab, but it was also my last summer after high school as well. Right. But, going to the dental lab and then, going to work for Richard in the LTL industry. And then that was really, I consider that the beginning, but it really wasn't. My entire life has been leading up to that job.
But I knew for sure that you were headed in that direction for the remainder of your career when you went to work for DSL.
Yeah.
That company where you were the manager of the one in Springdale for a while.
Oh, that was
over on Randall Wabi.
That was PIE Nationwide.
PIE.
Yeah, that was PIE Nationwide. Yeah. And that was right before DSL.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I was pretty certain then that that's the area that you were going to be in.
Yeah.
So
and that was I was technically a terminal operations manager, but I was the only one there.
Oh, yeah.
And so they don't give a 22-year-old the terminal manager position because then they got to give you big benefits and stuff like that. So they called you a terminal operations manager. And that was 9 months. And then they walked in the door and said, hey, they got sold to a holding company. It's back during the days of hostile takeovers. And they're like, oh, we're closing your terminal down. And I'd seen that before. And I'm like, oh, how much time do we have? And they're like, 5 o'clock, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And that was the first time I was out of work for any extended period of time. It was 3 months. And that was my first time. And I kind of questioned if that's what I wanted to do, if that was the way it was going to be. Yeah. But, worked out. And then came DSL.
Mm-hmm. I never did understand and still don't understand what you do
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you seem to do okay. And I know you have a lot of friends and a lot of connections. And so I think that you've been very fortunate
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
coming up the way you did through the ranks,
Yeah.
going to Walmart, working for them. And I know that it was a hardship a lot of times to travel,
Yeah.
but you got to see a lot of things that you would not have got to see otherwise.
Yeah. I never thought that. I thought the only way that I'd be able to see the places that I've been able to see was the Navy,
Uh-huh.
right. Or, the armed forces of some kind.
When I thought of the Navy, all I could think of was that you were going to be in a submarine underwater. And I didn't like that. Did not like the thought of you being in a submarine underwater.
Yeah. Well, that's probably where they would have put me. They would have hidden me out somewhere. But no, what we had originally talked about doing was being a dental technician on an aircraft carrier. And of course, that was the summer that Top Gun came out in 1986. And I thought, I'll go be a dental technician and then I'll figure out how to get into officer candidate school so I can fly jets, and that's about the time my eyesight started going bad. And I would have probably gone into the Navy and I would have never got on an aircraft carrier and I'd have never got to fly a jet and I would have been sad anyway.
You're right.
Yeah. I had to do something else.
So this worked out.
Yeah. This worked out good. I have some of my best high school classmates, they went into the Navy, and Scott Mom, who I still stay in touch with, they all went in about 1986. They did a year of college and then they went into the Navy. So they went in about 1986. Some of them got onto the USS Ranger, the USS America. Scott got his duties after basic training. They gave him the aircraft carrier, and as soon as he got his orders, they put his aircraft carrier in dry dock, and he spent his entire Navy career in Philadelphia driving a forklift. That's what would have happened to me. I'd have been with Scott in Philadelphia driving a forklift or something, back into logistics somehow.
Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah. But what else, as far as like our life, transportation and logistics that we haven't touched on, is there anything that we haven't touched on?
Oh my goodness. I'm sure there is, because we've been very busy people growing up. I always say that you and Jeff and I grew up together.
Yeah.
But man, I think we've touched base with all of family and friends that did this. And
one of the things, just reminded when you said friends, because we were close to the Reddishes for a long time.
Yes.
And Robert's dad had a trucking company.
He did.
E.L. Reddish Trucking Company, right? And seems like I found something on this one time, but here's my recollection, and you tell me if you remember any of this. So E.L. had interstate operating authority, and this is back before trucking deregulation. And so getting that level of operating authority was incredibly difficult. Right. And what I remember is that Mr. Hunt, that J.B. Hunt, bought his operating authority from him.
He did. And
that allowed J.B. Hunt to then operate nationwide.
That's what I remember too. Because I remember they had, Mr. Reddish had a little office shop on that. I don't even know if that street has a name or had a name at the time. It was just off of Pleasant Street. Kind of.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It wasn't that street that cuts through to 71. I think there was a street behind.
One street over.
Yeah, over to the north. But that's what he had. And then, I remember the talk about him selling to Mr. Hunt.
Yeah.
But Robert never, whether Mr. Reddish even talked much about it to his children, I don't know. Robert never talked about it.
Yeah. It's just, and
but
try to fact check myself, but that's what I remember is that
Yeah,
I remember going to Mr. Reddish's office
Mm-hmm.
one time, and I remember seeing E.L. Reddish, trucking company on there.
Yep. And I don't know what he hauled
I don't
in or
either.
out of there either, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. Is
Yeah.
That's where Mr. Hunt really got his teeth into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
By being able to buy those rides.
Yeah. That's what I remember as well. Interesting.
It is.
So long history. Our family's been in this business in one form or the other for a very long time.
Right.
It's been incredibly good to me as a human. It's allowed me to do a lot of things. Like you said, I checked I did somewhere around 700,000 miles when I worked for Walmart, travel. And that was only an 11-year period of time. So, a lot of trips overseas. I've seen a lot of things that I don't take for granted. I appreciate them very much. And I just think about our family and this, I wish that there was a lot of people, there's not a lot of people left that are alive that I would love to say thank you to, as far as the small and big impacts that they've had on my life. And, Don and Danny and, and Farrell and, all these people, like we were just surrounded by people. I think Goat Parker worked for Great Dane Trailers. Did Goat work for Great Dane? Somebody worked for Great Dane. I just remember Pinkley.
Alan Pinkley.
Yes.
Goat worked for Roadway, or was it Roadway?
I think that's right.
Freight Lines?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
That's where he worked.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's so, Farrell worked for Atlas when you guys got married, right? And then that ended shortly. He got laid off shortly after that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just, all those people that I grew up around, it made an impact on my life and allowed me to do the things that I've got to do. But I think like Don Phillips just, he loved Jeff and I and,
he did.
and, took us out on the truck and taught us a lot of things and,
good or bad.
Good or bad. Right. Wrong. Yes. Right. Good or bad. It's like, hey, brush your teeth. Now, what are you going to do? 60 miles. You're going to swallow it. You take some scope. Now you're going to swallow it,
Right.
And, but, just letting us in the trucks and showing us everything. And, I just think it's been amazing.
And you have had that advantage where I don't think children nowadays would be allowed
No.
in a truck
No.
like that. But I mean, Don did own his truck, but he hauled loads for Tyson's and
Walmart.
And I don't think he would be allowed. So you do need to be grateful for that.
Yeah.
That you had that opportunity.
Oh yeah. I'm incredibly grateful for it. And the fact that, back to the ice company again, you couldn't work a 14-year-old kid the way that we worked. I mean, there's no
15,
way.
16 hours a day and 24 hours a day on 4th of July.
On 4th of July.
4th of July was the biggie.
Yeah.
It started on the 3rd and it didn't end until the 5th or 6th.
No.
Because people were still out on the lake, still needing ice.
100%. And they sell, grocery stores sell 500 bags of ice a day.
Right.
And their machine only holds 250. So you're back at that store 2 times a day.
Yeah.
And it's great. Well, Mom, I know you didn't want to do this, but
thanks, KP, for being so nervous about the number 13.
You hear that, KP? But I appreciate you doing it. And this will be something that you and I have. And I think, it'll be a great episode for us to look back on. And I appreciate you sitting down. I try to tell you as much as I can. I'm grateful for my raising. So,
well, I couldn't refuse you anything. I am so proud of the person you have grown up to be, the man, and always was stubborn little boy sometimes. But like I said, I always felt like you and Jeff and I grew up together.
Yeah, we did.
You and I probably more because we were alone for quite a few years.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast right there.
Yeah, they don't want to hear about it.
That's a feature-length movie right there. But yeah.
No, I mean, one of my favorite memories, and this is going to your character as a person and how you have always been. You and I lived in this trailer house in Rogers, and we didn't have, I worked and you had to stay at a babysitter's, but anyway, you didn't have a high chair. You were probably a year and a half to 2 years old. And so I would fix you dinner and you would sit on like 3 catalogs in a chair.
That's awesome.
And you would carry a conversation on with me all the time you were eating about what you had done at the babysitter's that day. Gosh. So you had and have this personality. And so I'm just very proud of.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
What you've done.
Yeah, thank you. I know I'm stubborn to a fault sometimes, and recently discussed that. But no, I just
you probably got that from me.
Well, yeah, probably so. But it's all good. But no, I think I'm incredibly grateful for my raising and for you, and you never. There's probably times you could have given up on me or wanted to, but you never did. And, me and Jeff put you through the ringer and Jeff didn't do anything that I didn't do. He just got caught. Yeah. So, but no, I'm grateful for him as to be my brother as well. So I just want to say thanks for doing this. And, so we'll, tell everybody good night. We appreciate my mom. And
nice meeting everybody.
Yeah. So stay tuned for more. Maybe we'll get Mom back on here with KP sometime when it's not 13 related.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mom.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.